Hello, welcome to In the Footsteps of the Goddess, a video series that explores the journey of the divine feminine through patriarchy to a new human consciousness. I'm Hannah Maritz. I'm an artist and a healer, a lover of nature and the divine feminine. As I look around at the disaster we humans have created on this planet through patriarchal thinking and a false narrative about fear and violence and greed, my heart rebels because she knows that that's not who we truly are. It's not to our highest good. And we're capable of so much better than that. As an artist, I've come to realize that art, in all its forms, is an expression of our souls. And our souls are having a human experience. So who are we? And how do we find out? And can art help us understand who we are, where we've been, and where we're going? I know it can. And what I've found is very exciting. And I want to share it with you. But we're going to have to go look for the clues. So I invite you now to come with me. Let's go look for some clues. Let's begin with a simple question. Why is it that we refer to ourselves as mankind? Why not womankind or humankind? Well, wouldn't that be radical? And why is it that our leaders throughout history always seem to be men? Old men who love to send young men to war. And can you name one woman who has ever started a war? And did you know that all the other higher animals on earth are always led by elder females? They know instinctively that females possess the wisdom and the intuition that nurtures and preserves life without ever waging war. So, did we miss that memo? What's our excuse? And do you know that the human egg is hundreds of times bigger than a sperm and performs all the cell functions that create a whole new being? So, who does all the work and gets so little credit for it? And isn't it curious how the human egg so resembles the first mother, Mother Earth? Like mother, like daughter. And did you know that the mitochondria, the power source of every cell in the body, is located in the tail of the sperm to propel it forward? But after fertilization, both the tail and the mitochondria drop off. That means that all our mitochondria, whether we are male or female, is inherited from our mothers. So where does our power really come from? Well, it comes from the divine feminine, of course. So aren't humans really matrilinear? Yeah, Go tell that to the patriarchy. And why is God always pictured as an old man? Have they really forgotten that it takes two sexes to create life? And what is that wonderful cape embracing God? It looks like a big womb to me. So, even God comes from the divine feminine. Ah, is that what womb envy looks like? Well, right about now, you're probably thinking, things have always been like this. We've always had misogyny, child abuse, war, inequality, greed. But I'm not so sure about that. That may just be another patriarchal illusion. Fake news. But there's an alternate hidden story that reveals our real human journey. A very powerful story told by a little goddess of long ago, in a time when the feminine was the miraculous power of creation. A story of human beings living in harmony with themselves, with each other, and with the natural world. And when all life was held sacred. So art has opened up a portal, and I invite you now to step through it with me. Let's follow the breadcrumbs down the rabbit hole, through the looking glass, and in the footsteps of the goddess. Long ago, but not so long ago, God was a goddess, creator of the universe. She ruled every aspect of life, from sovereign to priestess, from healer to life-giver and life-taker. She ruled the life cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. She embodied the mystery and magic of life itself. But one day, something happened. Someone changed the channel. This must be the Patriarchy channel, the one with an endless loop of destruction, violence, exploitation, and trauma. Fear is the power source driving this channel. It paralyzes people, eats away their integrity and will, devours their ability to think and feel, and binds them together in mindless patriarchal madness. And that patriarchal pathology has brought us to the existential crisis we face today. A crisis of destruction of our natural world and the living systems on which all life depends. I call this derangement the Cyclops syndrome. Patriarchy is a one-eyed cyclops that sees only through one eye, the masculine one. Rabid, unhinged, and deadly, it creates disaster on our divinely created, wondrous earth, to the point where it threatens to destroy us all. How did this happen? And what happened to the goddess? Well, That question turned out to be the focus of my life's journey. When I arrived on this earthly plane, I found myself smack in the middle of the patriarchal pathology called World War II in Central Europe. So my early years were forged in a furnace of occupation, violence, and madness. And it was deepened even further by exodus and exile. But miraculously, despite the turmoil, I discovered a lifeline, an unexpected ally, a guardian angel. It took the form of a nurturing, gentle voice, the voice of an alternate reality that spoke the language of my ancestors in the form of fairy tales my mother had read me. These were empowering tales of a hero's journey in search of magic, mystery, and adventure. Encounters with powerful spirit animals and wise women who hold the secrets to enchantment, power, healing, and joy. The joy that comes from the union of masculine and feminine energies. As I grew older, that voice grew stronger, guiding me to surprising places. This is the story of that journey, a journey in search of the goddess. It was in 1989, in midlife, that a startling event propelled that journey into new dimensions. The Berlin Wall suddenly collapsed, freeing millions of people from bondage, opening up a portal of hope and change, and causing a major shift in human consciousness. I eagerly stepped through that portal to rediscover the heritage I had left behind. And I found myself in an enchanted place with deep, dark forests and charming medieval castles that suddenly appeared in unexpected places and reminded me of those old fairy tales my mother had read me. I discovered a cobblestone path that led to Prague's old medieval town. As I crossed a stone-arched bridge, I felt the stony stares of royal statues following me as if guarding the secrets of a land lost in time. The spires of a massive watchtower beckoned from the other side, and a graceful stone arch marked the entrance to the footsteps of the old world goddess. Inside, the old town was bustling with dazed tourists, looking like they had been dropped from a time machine. I squeezed through the crowd to discover back alleys and hidden passageways, where every turn seemed to reveal another layer of history. Excited and overwhelmed, I wandered aimlessly through the narrow streets, looking for my lost roots. Weary from my wanderings, I stumbled onto a massive old museum at the top of old Wenceslas Square. I slipped inside to have a look. Wandering through endless rooms, cavernous corridors, and elegant marble floors, I arrived at a small room, off to one side. Looking around, I noticed some small figures standing patiently on plastic pedestals, just waiting to be noticed. And they seemed to perk up when I stopped to read the label. Venus figures from the mammoth hunters of Dolny Viestonice, it read, from 27,000 BC. Wow, that took my breath away. I started to imagine how many generations of people it might be that had lived there before me. It was part of a collection of broken fragments made of bone, stone, and clay. They all seem to have come from the same site and may have been deliberately broken for ritualistic purposes. Reading on, I learned that all these figures came from a settlement located in Central Europe we call Dolny Viestonice. Situated between two mountain ranges, it was a bottleneck on the migration route of the great mammoths, making it a perfect place for human habitation. This is how the site looks today, with its imposing cliffs on one side. Among the artifacts found at this site, a beautiful black bear caught my eye. His gaze was fixed intently on something, as if he seemed ready to pounce, despite missing some legs. A stately mammoth, imposing despite her actual size, stood peacefully by, grazing on succulent grasses and delicate lichen, while a baby mammoth stood among the legs of the adults for protection. Meanwhile, a wolverine, a vicious predator of the plains, stalked in the grass, waiting for an opportunity to take down an unsuspecting youngster. The wrinkled head of a woolly rhino was a startling reminder of just how perilous life on the plains could be. His sharp horn and unpredictable nature could prove deadly while hunting on the plains. And you'd better beware of the bands of saber-toothed tigers stalking about in the underbrush. The wire used to display this artifact shows that the hole representing the eye is continuous with a hole at the back of the skull. Was this perhaps a pendant to be worn for protection or to inspire courage? But even more startling was an eerie, childlike face carved from mammoth tusk. The simple features looked like a jester's mask. A crooked mouth, sleepy eyes, and a pushed-in nose. They seemed both funny and sad at the same time. And right next to him was a real-life portrait. It was so real, I felt like it was looking right at me, ready to start up a conversation. Was it a man, I wondered? Maybe a mammoth hunter? His features carved from ivory were so expressive and human. He looked weathered and weary, hardened by the daily drama of life and death among the hunter-gatherers. And what about the artist who created him? It must have been someone with amazing skill. Who were these remarkable people, I wondered? All these figures had been found in a hut appearing to be a potter's studio, with a large clay oven standing at the center, and with the broken figures scattered about. This is one possible model of the kiln. And here is an artist's sketch of the settlement, with the potter studio on the right. A mammoth bone fence surrounded the compound for protection. But the most intriguing find of all is this beautiful face of a woman, lovingly carved in ivory. Was she the potter? A maker of amulets and sacred objects? Perhaps she was a shaman, and her hut a workshop for creating ceremonial objects. On closer inspection, she was found to have a crooked jaw, mouth, and face, very much like the jester's mask. And it turns out that both these faces had been found in the same pile of broken artifacts. Here is a diagram of the hut, with its kiln at the center, and its broken objects scattered about. A small brook runs diagonally at the top, and a wall surrounds the rest. Notice that just below the kiln is a grave of a woman who was found to have a deformed jaw. She was wearing a necklace of fox's teeth and clutching a fox pelt. The fox is a common spirit guide in shamanic practice, and the grave was lined with red ochre, a sign of high regard. And for all these reasons, it is most likely that this is the same venerable person, a wise woman, a clan leader, and a shaman. But the most famous female figure from this site is a small black goddess made of clay. She does not represent a portrait, for the face is sketchy, abstract, and minimal. But most notable is a very large pregnant belly with ample hips and pendulous breasts, suggesting a focus on fertility and abundance. Her arms look more like wings, suggesting the bird-like qualities of a goddess of transformation. 4 curious holes in the top of her head seem to have held feathers, again revealing her bird-like attributes. This was undoubtedly an amulet used in ceremony for celebration and veneration of the goddess. There were many pendants found at Dolní Věstonice. Among them were very simple abstract representations of the divine feminine. A hole at the top allowed a pendant to be worn round the neck. This is a major clue in understanding what these people believed and held sacred. As much as a Christian might wear a cross, or a Wiccan might wear a pentacle, a pendant is a declaration of identity. So these, then, were children of the goddess. And the discovery of many double-breasted pendants indicates that this is an icon of a commonly held belief, the belief in a feminine deity. This particular pendant defines this belief even further. Notice that there are 9 notches decorating each breast, suggesting the 9 moons of gestation. Then notice the double lines on each breast, a symbol called the power of 2, or the power of co-creation, according to archaeologist Maria Gimbutas. As one of the first women archaeologists, she broke with traditional male interpretations of ancient artifacts, which tended to objectify and sexualize female imagery. Instead, she brought a feminine viewpoint, which was centered around the qualities of caring for and fostering life. What could be more sacred to the divine feminine than the image of a child nursing from its mother? And yet, a mother nursing her child in public today may well be the object of scorn and ridicule. And the sound of sucking has become a profanity in our own culture of feminine disempowerment. This, then, was the world of our ancestors, as imagined by artist Mauricio Anton. A world filled with creatures large and small, but mostly just enormous. Humans were dwarfed by such massive, boisterous, and rowdy characters. It took strong community and careful planning to survive and thrive in this environment, and even to create art. So by now, I was hooked by this amazing narrative, and I continued to dig deeper. We can only imagine what it must have been like to be confronted with an angry, hairy beast towering over us with a pair of enormous curling tusks, a snorting, musty breath, and a shrieking trumpet that defies us to come any closer. All the while, the ground trembles beneath our feet to the agitated milling of an anxious herd of mammoth. And yet the Czech artist Zdeněk Burian managed to do just that, as well as to evoke the terror of being right in the path of a couple of charging, enraged hairy rhino. For every venture outside the compound was an adventure in fear and survival, as the howl of a pack of giant wolves on the hunt turned the blood cold. While sudden death could just as well be waiting quietly in the underbrush. For there is no exit from the grasp of a saber-toothed tiger. So, for the hunt to be successful with a minimal loss of life, it took great cunning, planning, teamwork, and a deep understanding of the animals themselves. A deep pit covered by branches was the hunter's best chance, for a mammoth trapped in a pit could neither fight back nor escape. For the meat of one mammoth fed a tribe for weeks or months. Its bones made perfect building material for shelter from the cold winters, and its enormous hide was big enough to cover it. Living in small tribal settlements afforded the best protection from the constant dangers and uncertainties of life. Communal living created deep bonds among all its members. Life revolved around the needs of the most vulnerable, the women and children. For without the constant renewal of life, the social structure that made survival possible would collapse very quickly. At the spiritual center of every tribe was a shaman. He or she created rituals and ceremonies that continually strengthened the bonds of community, calling on the spirits for wisdom on issues facing the tribe, issues such as healing, hunting, migration, and personal relations. Here the village shaman sits in her hut, creating clay objects to be made for sacred ceremony. When winter finally gives in to spring, the prehistoric plains burst into full bloom, with lush grasses and fragrant flowers, attracting massive herds of animals, eager to fill their hungry bellies. They were soon joined by a neighboring herd of red deer peacefully gorging on the meadow grass. A pair of aurochs, the giant ancestors of our cattle, stood quietly grazing at a distance from all the commotion. A group of bison joined in the feast, lounging in the warm sun and ruminating on the tasty grass. Soon, pregnant bellies were giving birth to a new generation of young as their mothers stood watchfully by. Within a few hours, the foals were steady on their legs, and drinking their mother's rich milk made them grow quickly. Spotted fawns blended into the dappled prairie, keeping close to their mothers as they played and explored in their new domain. And herds of bison gathered close by in small family groups, with the powerful older males on the outside for protection, and the females close to the youngsters in the middle. Inevitably, two males would confront one another, with clacking hooves, deep snorts, and piercing shrieks as they fought for dominance. But the mares barely noticed all the drama. While all that commotion was just too much for one feisty male, who would have none of it. An unexpected sound creates panic and a sudden stampede. And so the herd moves on to new pastures. In the meantime, the stirring of spring has roused the human tribes too. Grateful for having survived another winter, they are preparing to honor the bringer of new life, the goddess. And for some of these tribes, it was time to renew their covenant with the divine in the form of a vision quest, a journey to the sacred caves of their ancestors. In the regions that are today France and Spain, prehistoric people have left behind intriguing evidence of their devotion to the divine feminine in the form of cave paintings. So let's tag along as the people prepare for their quest. Carrying few supplies, they will gather all they need along the way, singing to the land as they walk and preparing for a very important encounter. After days of walking and singing and telling stories, the weary travelers begin to recognize the familiar outlines of their ancestral hills, which seem to be welcoming them home again. At the base of their sacred mountain, standing before the entrance to the womb of the earth, the people have prepared well for this moment. They enter the cave one by one in reverent silence, scraping their hands and knees over jagged rocks. They are quickly swallowed up in the cold, dark embrace of the cave walls. Surely their hearts quickened, and their imaginations raced wildly as the darkness closed in, with visions of dangers that might lie ahead. What if they took a wrong turn and fell into a deep pit? What if the passageway is blocked by fallen rocks? and there's no room to turn around. What if they disturb a nest of angry vipers? Or wake up a grumpy cave bear? What powerful force could have driven these people to take on such a perilous adventure, I wondered. A journey of fear is a journey of initiation. It clears the mind, begins anew, and prepares the soul for receiving new gifts. Finally, the endless scrambling through the small passageways ended when a space opened up overhead. The travelers stood up, stretched, and reached for their oil lamps, packed them with fat, and lit the wicks with embers they had carefully brought from their last fire. In the growing, flickering light, a sign appeared on the wall overhead. It was a vulva, mark of the goddess, welcoming them to her sanctuary. Animated by this sign, they pressed forward through the corridor. On the ceiling overhead, the shapes of running animals seemed to be leading the way. A giant stag with spectacular candelabra antlers seemed to be pointing the way. Slipping through a tight opening, they arrived at the grand inner sanctum. Their shuffling feet echoed off the walls as they spread out to fill the space. Flickering lamps slowly revealed the ceiling overhead, teeming with animals dancing in the darkness. They had arrived at the womb of the goddess. Transfixed, you could almost hear the pounding of their hooves, the snuffling of their breath, and their screams of sheer delight as the animals galloped across the universe. A pair of bison parted ways to make way for the intrusion. Some people who study these paintings say we will never understand what they mean. Well, I say, as long as we view them through patriarchal eyes, they will remain an unfathomable mystery. But if we can look outside the patriarchal box and shift our perspective to a feminine lens, these visions begin to reveal profound layers of wisdom and meaning. So you may be wondering, why did these people go to such lengths to create these masterpieces on a cave wall? And what do they signify? A frieze nearby provides some clues. Originally, when these caves were discovered, archaeology was the domain of men. From a male perspective, they saw these images as hunting scenes, the lines representing arrows, and the animals their prey. But when women finally broke into their ranks and added a feminine perspective, the whole narrative changed. First, the women noticed that almost all the animals were female and pregnant, and the lines pointed to the location of pregnancy. So they most likely are energy lines, lines of accent or highlights, revealing where new life is growing. So you might say that this was the first temple of creation. Look carefully inside the belly of this beautiful black mare. Can you make out her foal etched into the wall? He's running just like his mother. Maybe we should call this the Shrine of Pregnancy. In the meantime, the lilting sounds of a bone flute brought everyone together to begin the ceremonies. A powerful feeling of oneness and harmony descended over the circle with the steady beat of a shaman's drum. Time and space began to melt away, generating a deeply altered state of consciousness. Out of the darkness, spirit animals began to emerge, growling, chattering, and snorting as they offered guidance and wisdom. Inspired by their journey to the spirit world, the artists searched for a place on the wall that seemed to call out for a new image. Then, with a slow circular motion, they began mixing earth minerals with water in small seashells. When the spirit moved them, they dipped their brush into their earth tones, while conjuring up what dreams their brush might create. Shapes in the rock wall suggested a form waiting to emerge. A charcoal stick began an outline, and the brush followed as the form of an animal began to take shape. One artist blew charcoal from her hand onto the wall to indicate a fuzzy, disheveled mane. And then she playfully added a tuft of furry beard under the chin, in what we might call spray painting. While another artist overlapped running legs to create a sense of perspective, while someone else cut a stencil from a piece of bark and laid it over her pregnant belly to create a clean edge of red-brown markings, and then used a fur ball to burnish the soft, fuzzy haunches. With a rabbit hair brush, they added plants, symbols of growth, across her pregnant belly and in front of her chest to indicate the life force at work there, growing new life. And finally, they drew a comb-like symbol overhead, indicating the caring, nurturing presence of the goddess, firing up the renewal of life. As I took it all in, I was struck with awe when I realized that these were the very same methods of painting I had learned in art school 20,000 years later. Could they have possibly known that they had created the first art school? We present-day artists owe these long-ago ancestors our gratitude and our admiration. Not only were these artists proficient in representing reality, but they were also able to express joy and whimsy in an exaggerated, cartoony way. Look at this powerful running cow, topped with a tiny, jaunty head, a dish face, pointy ears, and floppy horns, giving her a silly, playful look. And there may be even deeper layers of meanings to these paintings. Some people see embedded in the figures a record of constellations in the sky. So what we may be witnessing is the beginnings of ancient astrology. Ancient peoples spent most of their time outdoors and would have had an intimate knowledge of the configurations of the stars above them. So, Seeing images in the stars reflecting life below is a very good indication of the beginnings of a cosmic consciousness. As above, so below. But the most important ceremony still lay ahead: the initiation of the young into adulthood and into the world of spirit. The shaman began to create sacred space by blowing out clouds of fragrant herbs. He drummed, chanted, and invoked the ancestors to join in the ceremony. When the moment arrived, he arose, made his way to an opening in the ground, and disappeared in the darkness. One by one, the acolytes followed. Grasping a thick rope, they slid down a steep passageway between two huge rocks, feeling their way in the darkness, until they dropped with a thud to the floor below. This is the modern-day illuminated and enhanced version of that same passageway. You can only imagine that the original way down in complete darkness, with only the feel of the rock for guidance, would have been a true test of initiation. When everyone had gathered below, and the lamps were relit, strange images emerged on the walls. One powerful image captures the essence of the ceremony about to take place. The central figure is a shaman with bird toes and a bird mask, indicating he is possessed by the goddess. In a moment of epiphany, the goddess reveals herself to him in the form of a great bull. And the shaman, overcome, swoons at her overpowering presence. At that moment, he drops his bird staff, the symbol of his power. Like the shaman, the acolytes will soon have a profound encounter with the goddess themselves. How will that encounter transform them? And what is the significance of the strange figure of the rhino on the left? If we once again refer to the constellations, these images take on a new layer of meaning. Taurus becomes the bull of the goddess. The shaman is represented by Orion. The rhino has transformed into Leo. And the staff is symbolized by Sirius, the dog star, brightest star in the sky. Is it possible that we could also infer from this narrative a metaphor for the journey of the soul through life and death? The goddess representing the life force, the rhino as death, and the shaman as the human searching for enlightenment. The very same sky pattern appears thousands of years later in the Egyptian zodiac at Dendera Temple. The bull is in green, facing backwards. The shaman, in blue, is represented as the twins. The rhino, in yellow, has become Leo, and the staff, in red, has transformed into Horus, the Egyptian sky god. There is possibly one more astrological relationship embedded in these figures: The eyes of the bull, the shaman, and the bird seem to connect into what some say is the summer triangle, a formation of the stars Vega, Deneb, and Altair. And so it may be, under the watchful eyes of heaven, that the young people were finally initiated into adulthood and into the realm of the goddess. When the final ceremony had been completed, the people's covenant with the goddess had been renewed, and it was time to begin the return to the middle world. Bleary-eyed from days in the dark and disoriented by a deeply altered state, the people began a journey of transition to make their way back. The tight walls of the passageways helped bring them back into their physical bodies, much as the birth process takes a child from dream time into life in the physical world. Finally, a few rays of light filter through the darkness, preparing their misty eyes for re-entry into a light-filled world. Squeezing through the opening, the travelers are once again reborn into the earthly realm. And at this moment of coming back into the world, I ask you, the viewer, to also return to your body, to stretch and move, look around you, and fully inhabit the physical world again. So please take a few moments now before embarking on the second part of our journey. In life outside the caves, a touchstone of the goddess was a small feminine figure carved in stone and called the Aeolian goddess. By holding a stone figure in the hand, one could summon the intervention of the divine with issues like fertility, pregnancy, birth, and health. Hundreds of these little icons have been discovered all around the Mediterranean region, attesting to the universality of a widely held belief in a female deity. This little figure is probably the oldest icon discovered so far, dating from between 80,000 BC to 200,000 BC from Palestine. Carved in stone, she is very simple, abstract, and symbolic. Her minimal arms and legs indicate that these aspects are of little importance. But large breasts, belly, thighs, and vulva indicate that she represents the attributes of life-giving and nurturing. Her head has no neck and is not a head at all, but instead penal-looking. Thus she honors the creative power of the male and female principles in creating life together. Notice that her overall shape is womb-like. This is very important to keep in mind because the goddess culture is also a culture venerating the womb. These figures, and hundreds more like them, are found throughout the Neolithic world and indicate the universality of a womb culture. Shaped like a womb, birth canal, and fallopian tubes, they are crowned with a bird face, confirming the presence of the goddess. Red is the color of the womb and of menstrual blood, that magical elixir that precedes the conception of new life. Women of the tribe menstruated together, their flowing blood announcing the presence of the goddess. It was a signal for a time of sacred coupling. This was a time of celebration, for the coming of new life brings prosperity and joy to the tribe. Red announces the renewal of life. Then I recalled my own experiences on this side of the looking glass. When my first blood came, instead of celebration and joy, I was met with total silence. When I should have been honored and supported at this most important time, I was ignored and shunned, as if this messiness doesn't exist, as if the feminine doesn't exist, all in accordance with the patriarchal paradigm. And today, red is no longer the color of life, but of danger. In 1908, while building a railroad in this small town on the Austrian Danube, some workmen dug up a trove of prehistoric artifacts. One of them would rise to world fame, a little 4-inch goddess of stone they called the Venus of Willendorf. She is the embodiment of the goddess herself. She was named the Venus of Willendorf by male archaeologists. But this is a misnomer, for she is neither the image of a real woman nor a sexual image. Instead, like the Apuleian goddess, she is symbolic. Her exaggerated thighs, very pregnant belly, large breasts, and prominent vagina all attest to her power of creation, to pregnancy, birth, nurture, and abundance. Her arms and legs are minimal and therefore of little importance. Her red coloring, the sign of menstrual blood, indicates her power to create life as well as to rebirth the dead. Thus, tombs were often lined with red ochre to invoke the recycling of souls. The renewal and recycling of life is fundamental to this earth-based belief system. Notice that she is womb-shaped, a sign of the womb culture. And her most enigmatic characteristic is her head, which is not a head at all. Instead, I believe that it is most likely yet another powerful symbol of the goddess, the beehive. Why is the beehive sacred to the goddess? The beehive is the ultimate symbol of community, cooperation, selflessness, and a single-minded caring for the young. A community of females dedicated to the creation and support of life. And that is the mind of the goddess. But the goddess does not exclude her male counterpart. Far from it, she celebrates her beloved consort. This very unique icon, with both male and female characteristics, honors that power of co-creation, by combining both masculine and feminine energies as one. The Venus of Lozelle is another figure without facial features, affirming that she is not an individual, but a symbol, with a voluminous body, emphasizing her life-giving aspect. Her hand rests on her pregnant belly, and she holds a horn of plenty in her right hand, on which are carved 13 notches. 13 is the number of moons in a year when a woman can conceive. As traces of red ochre remain in the stone, some archaeologists have suggested that the horn is filled with menstrual blood. This icon is made up of eggs, a symbol of becoming. The lines at the back may represent tail feathers, revealing her bird nature. The bird is the principal symbol of the goddess for a number of reasons. A bird is twice born, once as an egg and again as a chick, symbolizing that the soul too is reborn. Like the bird, the soul inhabits many realms. From the earth, from the water, and ascending into the sky, the bird symbolizes the journey of the soul. Thus, the bird goddess is the engine of transformation. This ceramic plate is decorated with eggs, moving in a spiral and representing the life cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. This concept is an earth-based view of the life process our ancestors understood so well. Over time, belief systems have shifted and been replaced by a fear-based belief that death is the end, rather than one more step in a never-ending cycle. During labor, a pregnant woman became the goddess herself, as evidenced by these figures of women wearing a bird mask during labor. The lines on their bodies seem to indicate not only the intensity of contractions, but they also seem like an embrace of the goddess. The sitting posture naturally used the forces of gravity to help in birthing. Throughout human history, childbirth has been the domain of women. Who but another woman could possibly understand the process and pain of pregnancy and childbirth? And yet, this most sacred task has also been hijacked by patriarchal thinking, making it a technical and clinical process, complete with bright lights, masked strangers, cold instruments, toxic drugs, and invasive procedures. The clinical has eclipsed the sacred. Is it any wonder that we in America have one of the highest rates of maternal death in the world? The sacred work of the death goddess is to guide the soul through the underworld. Her whiteness is the color of bones. Her arms lie still across her chest in a pose of peace. Her face is featureless, except for the bird beak, which reveals the presence of the goddess. She who gives life guides it on its next journey. Sheila Nagig is the rebirthing goddess. Her frog-like features, big round eyes, half-moon mouth, and spindly legs all indicate that she's also the frog goddess of fertility. Her beak nose reveals that she's an aspect of the goddess. While this image may be shocking at first from our sexualized patriarchal viewpoint, this Celtic goddess is actually inviting the souls of the dead to re-enter her womb, awaiting rebirth. Rebirth is the key tenet to understanding the eternal nature of life, and is the major difference that separates the goddess belief from the patriarchal view that eternal life depends on prescribed behaviors and the good graces of male intermediaries. Tombs were designed to enhance the journey of rebirth by recreating a womb. This Tholos tomb is built into the earth to resemble a pregnant belly, complete with a womb-like chamber and a long birth canal lined with red ochre. Another device for hastening rebirth was found inside a tomb in Brittany. Surrounding the altar were 4 rock slabs engraved with swirling energy lines. These represent the erotic force that animates life and will reanimate the souls of the dead. At the center of each tablet is a vagina, the portal of universal life energy. These slabs are like prayer tablets for summoning rebirth for the souls of the dead. Many of the earliest temples were designed to emulate the body of the goddess, like these on Malta. As in the caves, the devotees would enter and exit through the birth canal. One of the rituals observed in these temples was a blessing of the grain on the spring equinox by the first rays of the sun, which were thought to be magical. A seed is the symbol of new beginnings, of growth, becoming, and of transformation. And the feminine body is the temple that gestates life. This stunning Etruscan figure reveals yet another burial practice that facilitated the rebirth of the soul. The ashes of the dead were deposited within the belly of an urn that resembled a pregnant woman. Here they could rest until such a time that the soul was ready to be reborn again. Children's toys perfectly reveal the mindset and values of a culture, for they are the first teachers and role models that mold young minds. These prehistoric toys from 8000 BC reveal a soft, nurturing, earthy female figure, serene in her being and grounded in the protective nature of Mother Earth. Whereas our modern dolls teach our children the patriarchal values of sexualized and objectified womanhood, as defined by the fantasies of men. A plastic body reflects the armoring and rigidity that best serves a woman living in a man's world. Her doe-like feet barely touch the ground. Her hands are graceful but frail, and her arms and legs are like twigs. She's hidden by makeup and adorned with fanciful hair. The message that this Barbie teaches is one of disempowerment, of looking outwardly for validation. She is the image of an ungrounded woman, separated from her true power and nature. A doll-sized clay goddess found in southern Moravia embodies a very different sensibility. With hands and arms raised up, she embodies a supplicant or worshiper of a greater force. With legs, feet, and buttocks solid as pillars, She is deeply rooted in nature and in Mother Earth. Her featureless face, except for a small nose and ears, indicates that she represents all womanhood, rather than an individual. Small breasts and a protruding navel seem to symbolize her connection to the greater feminine, going all the way back through endless mothers to the original umbilicus of Mother Earth. The visceral power of the earth-based goddess calls on us to experience the world in a balanced way, one that honors all life and makes us whole again with nature and with the earth, makes us whole again with both our feminine and masculine aspects. The earth goddess is the life force, animating the fields and the forests, the plants and the animals, animating ourselves and all creation. But I notice a sea of ancient hands waving at us through the looking glass, indicating that it's time to conclude this part of the journey. As our ancestors blew paint over their hands to create a signature on a cave wall, I wonder if they could have imagined that one day, thousands of years into the future, they might be reaching across time to remind us of our priceless legacy as deeply loving, nurturing, creative beings who honor and celebrate the mystery and magic of life on Earth. Please join me for more adventures of the goddess as she continues to shapeshift through our human journey of awakening.